Selden Dotan. I grew up in West Omaha. My parents built out west before most of the Jewish community certainly was building out west, and went to Catlin Elementary School in the beginning, and it was Royalwood, the neighborhood in Royalwood, and I belonged to Temple Israel. I have fond memories of my cousins living down the street and playing for hours with the neighbors, and just really enjoying this new neighborhood. My cousins and I were the only Jewish kids, I think, at Catlin at the time, and so even from a young age I remember that was something that I was identified with. Being singled out on a holiday to sing Hanukkah songs, and I remember distinctly my cousin being called upon to stand up and sing it all by himself in front of the whole school in the gym, and he was horrified and froze, and I think I said, well, we don't need to do that right now, or something like that. But when I was in the 5th grade, my family moved to a different home, and I moved to Westside High School, or Westside Schools. Although my sister did not. She was at Burke High School, and she stayed, so we were in 2 different districts, which was pretty interesting. And over the years I was very involved with Jewish Community Center at Temple. I was very involved with Temple Youth, and went to the youth leadership camps through the Reform movement, and ultimately I decided that I was going to be a rabbi. That was my course. I was also in BBYO and had a lot of friends, and it was very interesting for me to meet people from the other synagogues, and I started going to Bethel and Beth Israel from time to time with my other friends. So I had really been kind of inside this Reform movement life and started getting a taste of other places, which was great for me. I went on an Israel mission when I was a junior, and somehow knew from the minute that I stepped in Israel that there was some kind of future for me there. And continued with a lot of participation in the Reform Youth Movement, a lot of leadership kinds of things. And I also got involved here at the Jewish Community Center, and they had started a new citywide youth committee, I think it was, and I was asked to be on a committee through the JCC. I was the youth representative, so I was already getting exposed to the adult Jewish community and having an opportunity to interact in a way that was more than just with my own peers, but talk about how my life as a young adult was very, very important to me. I went to the University of Wisconsin and got involved with Hillel there, and knew that I was bound to go on junior abroad in Israel. And everything I did was about going to junior abroad in Israel. So I took Hebrew classes, and I took history, and studied with some amazing individuals, of whom Professor George Mossy at the University of Wisconsin, who also taught at Hebrew University. And I was just there in Madison this weekend, and they've named an entire block-long building after Professor Mossy, so it's just such a great honor to have studied with this man, and also being in the field that I am. His work is really significant, so little did I know as a freshman that his work would be so important. But I always felt that I always came back home on my summers. I worked as an intern, a college intern at the Jewish Community Center, and worked at camps forever with Chuck Arnold and with Marlon Frost and Helen Epstein, and it was just great being involved with people who have been here in Omaha for so many years and influenced the community. So I felt like I was always having some kind of mentorship somewhere along the line. Steve Rod was here at some point, and others who really did influence the community in a big way. I went on, did my junior abroad in Israel, and came back and finished my college, and then went on to the Hebrew Union College, not to be a rabbi, to be a Jewish educator. I studied a year in Israel, stayed another year in Israel, and came back to the States to Los Angeles, and I finished my master's in Jewish education in curriculum and teaching. And ultimately the degree was to be a director of a supplementary Hebrew school, which I knew I was not going to do. Married Amnon Dotan, who's from Kibbutz Ayelet Shachar in Israel, and I thought that our immediate plans were going to be to move to Israel, and I wanted to work in informal education. But we heard of a job opening up at the Jewish Community Center in Cultural Arts, and I took that job and came to Omaha. We lived here for 5 years, I continued to work on what was then a very strong basis in the cultural arts here in Omaha. Then we did take our children to Israel. We have 2 children, Liat and Yonatan, and we lived in Israel for 6 years. I worked in Israel for the Shoah Foundation. I interviewed Holocaust survivors in the Northern Galilee. I think there were 30 survivors who I interviewed, and it was all in Hebrew, and it was a complete it was a complete education for me, because as much as I knew about the Holocaust at that time, I had to really research every single person's history, and everyone came from a different place. I interviewed someone from Holland, I interviewed someone from Poland who ended up in Uzbekistan. I interviewed a man whose journey took him to China. There were numerous people from Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia. There were people who I became very close to because of these interviews. One of the interviews I did lasted for 8 hours. And it was amazing. This woman was an apprentice to someone who worked with the underground in Bialystok, and so, I heard every detail of her life during that time of the war, and it just inspired me. I had background and of course education in the history of the Holocaust, but I didn't know as much as I did by the end of my Spielberg Shoah Foundation experience. From there, I was able to land a job at the Ghetto Fighters Museum in the Western Galilee, and I worked in their children's museum at the it's called Yad L'Yeled, and I worked with them for 3 years, primarily as a tour guide in their children's museum and as a project director for a program called the Book Sharing Project. And that book sharing project was pairing Israeli classrooms, high school classrooms, to high school class, or middle school, I guess it was, to middle school classrooms in the United States, and particularly in Partnership 2000, which became important because the Ghetto Fighters Museum was in the partnership area that Omaha was in. So I interacted with people who were coming back and forth from Omaha in Israel. It was a great combination, and they were looking for someone to help coordinate that project in the United States. And at that time, Bob Wilson had come to Israel with a partnership group, or with a mission, I guess it was. And Bob had an idea, which is always interesting. And Bob was thinking about whether or not we could bring me back to Omaha with my family to work on the project here in Omaha, and to travel and go and work with the teachers who were um, presenting this reading project to their students. And they were mostly located in Boston, Los Angeles, New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Texas. So somehow we worked it out, and through some grant funds and a lot of planning, I was able to come back to Omaha. And we thought we were going to come for 2 years. Our children at that time were going into the second and the fifth grade. And as it turned out, I worked on the project here and traveled a lot to train teachers in all of the communities that I mentioned. And when I came, I took an office here at the Anti-Defamation League and did some projects with Bob dealing with Holocaust education, because at that time, in the late 1990s, early 2000, Holocaust education was really just taking off, and the concepts and the objectives and the goals of what that meant were taking form, especially at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and Yad Vashem and the Ghetto Fighters. And we were getting so many requests at the ADL that the job started to turn into, how do we create an organization out of the needs that are being requested from the community. So rather than going back in 2 years, we decided to stay. And our kids were getting settled, and it just wasn't time to leave yet. I continued to do projects with the Ghetto Fighters Museum. I brought in a group of women who are a chorus and did some music in the schools. They're all children of Holocaust survivors, so it was a really great connection for them and the kids. And we started to create this organization called the Institute for Holocaust Education. We grew it out, a lot of help from the ADL. Their programs that were already in place sort of meshed with all the work that I began to do. We were running a project called Bearing Witness, which is an ADL program for Catholic educators, and created a really great base of teachers in the Catholic schools, people who were completely committed to working with us and volunteered their time over and over again. And then ADL, Shoah Foundation, and Yad Vashem were writing a curriculum guide called Echoes and Reflections, which I got involved with as well, and we were a training site for Echoes. It's a curriculum on the history of the Holocaust, but uses survivor testimony from the Shoah Foundation as a means to have first-person testimony to correspond with the historical material and the primary resources that this curriculum offered. What was important to the donor of the Echoes and Reflections project was that teachers were trained properly to use it, so that it wouldn't be this big notebook that was sitting on someone's shelf. And we became an important site for Echoes. I took it on the road with some other individuals, and we went all the way out to western Nebraska. We became connected with the educational service units throughout Nebraska. There are, 14, 15, 16 service units that are highly equipped with the most up-to-date technology, so you can use DVD technology of all sorts to be able to train teachers in these sites. So as of date now, we've trained over 800 teachers in Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas in this particular curriculum, and I see us as a leader in working with teachers in the community, particularly on that curriculum that's helpful in whatever unit they may decide to teach. Echoes has since expanded, the Shoah Foundation has created an online video editor for survivor testimony that uses the concepts of echoes and reflections online for students in a classroom to be able to tell a story through survivor testimony, and it's an excellent vehicle for kids and teachers. The Institute for Holocaust Education grew through programming and just personal interest and the interest of the teachers I was working with. So a number of things really came out of the interaction with the community. Today we're I consider it a full-fledged organization that runs on a nice budget, and we have one full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. We're built on 3 pillars, I guess you could say. One is education, certainly, community programming in the arts and otherwise. We've produced an opera, we have dealt with art, we have, I'll talk about a little bit about some of those projects. And then thirdly, our work with the survivors themselves and their families. We have made an effort to make sure that all the survivors are contacted a number of times throughout the year, and we have a volunteer team who go out and deliver a holiday gift, just so we can have that personal touch, and things happen because of those visits. One of the most important things that's happened, we had someone deliver I think it was for Tu B'Shvat. We make sure that we deliver during Tu B'Shvat because it's so cold here in Omaha in the wintertime, and it's likely that people don't get out as often. And this person went to visit someone, and she came hopping to the door because she had a leg injury and was not getting the proper health care. So that person reported it to us, and we reported it to, not reported it, but we shared it with the social workers over the Blumkin home, and it turned into a 2-month stay at the Blumkin home because she could not take care of herself at home, or her husband couldn't help. So those kinds of little visits and community outreach to the Holocaust survivors who, although they had survivors group for years, they didn't necessarily have the community looking out for them as a community of Holocaust survivors. We've had a lot of different groups coming in and out of Omaha, but the survivors kind of wanted to come in and mesh. And as they've gotten older, and as so many have passed away, even in these past number of years that I've been working here, we've seen that community has been very important for them. And we've been in touch with most of their children, so we send a letter out to the children once a year at least. We've had programs where we've invited the whole family to come. We try and address the survivor families when someone passes away. So the other piece that's important about that is that Jewish Family Services has been involved, and we don't work on our own. This is definitely a need for all of us to work together and make sure that they're cared for as needed. So I've mentioned the work that we do with the survivors, and there are a lot of ongoing things. I mean, it's every day. We get a call, they feel comfortable enough to call us to ask for help in all kinds of ways. Sometimes it's with reparations. They get a letter in the mail, it's in German, they can't read it, they call us. And so it's been very rewarding because I've got to know all these people that I didn't know before. So there are these other 2 pillars that we kind of, see ourselves as working on. And one, educational piece. And I've been able to work with almost every high school and middle school in Omaha, and we've run classes through UNO that are, give teachers master's credit. In those classes, we will take them for a day to the Holocaust Museum. We go in the morning and we come back at night in DC. And what happens is these teachers feel really committed to our work, and they pass it on to their colleagues, or they'll call us for a request of a survivor to come into school. So we've started a speakers bureau, and the 5 or 6 survivors, we have 2 or 3 who can speak regularly, and then there are others who will speak from time to time. In addition to that, we get community members to take them to the schools. So we've been able to develop a lot of networking through the teachers that we are able to train for a lot of different things. One of the things that's been very significant, I believe, in the work of the Institute for Holocaust Education is the development of a group called the Nebraska Holocaust Education Consortium. That is a group of teachers throughout the state. They're from Lincoln, they're from Adams, Nebraska, they're from places I've never heard of, Edgar, Nebraska, Omaha, of course, and every single one of these individuals has had extensive training in Holocaust history and education, educational methods. Some of them are United States Holocaust Memorial Museum fellows. Some of them have gone beyond that stage, and they themselves go out and teach in different regions that the museum in DC assigns them to. Many of them have pushed and pressed on their administrations at school and have their own Holocaust semester courses. It's not just for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever in their school, it's an entire semester course. Lincoln Public Schools, plus the Catholic schools in Lincoln, the high school in Lincoln, have semester courses in every single one of the schools. So there are 7 high schools in Lincoln, and every one of them has a semester course. It doesn't mean that there's one section. These kids elect to take this course, and in many cases some of the teachers are teaching 5 and 6 sections of Holocaust semester-long courses, either in English or in social studies. So when we think, and then Omaha also has a course at Central High School as a result of a teacher who got very involved with Echoes and Reflections with us, was trained in New York and Israel with us, and then came back and just pushed her administration. It's unheard of to have a course with a specific subject like this, but they have so many sections of the class that they had to train another teacher, and now I think they have 7 sections of the class. So it's been a network that trickles down and has sort of exploded in the community. The consortium members are my colleagues and my friends, and they are tremendous. We go out and represent all of the professional workshops that happen throughout the year, so whether it's English language or social studies or technology, there's always a consortium teacher who will have a table explaining what the Institute for Holocaust Education does and what opportunities there are for them. We continue to partner with ADL in many projects. Often we'll do things side by side. Sometimes we get tables at these conferences where it's an ADL IHE table. Or we'll do lectures and ADL will co-sponsor the lecture, those kinds of things. So, of course, they've been able to support us as the organization grew. We have created our own budget, and we raise our own funding to be able to continue what happens in the Institute for Holocaust Education. Up until this last year, the Jewish Federation provided a very minimal allocation to us, so we were writing grants constantly and finding funders who believed in the work that we did or do. And that continues, and we do the outreach, but also they come to us from time to time. We have a governance council made up of community members who are not only people from the Jewish community, but also we have teachers on this committee and others from the non-Jewish community who either had children at a school where their teachers taught the Holocaust or something. It's very interesting how the people who support us have become involved with us. One of the projects that we did a number of years ago that really brought a lot of the pieces together is Portraits of Survival. It is an exhibit that we put together. David Radler, who's the local photographer, went with me, and we went to the survivors' homes, and he took photos of them. That project turned into an exhibit and also a book that David put together, and is very, very significant because we were doing this in conjunction with the 70-year anniversary of Kristallnacht, which occurred in 1938 in November, and we knew that we needed to do something here in the community to mark that event. In some places, Kristallnacht is commemorated every single year. In Omaha, we commemorate Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Commemoration Day, in the springtime. So we had our event at the Jocelyn, put together a DVD that included some of the survivor stories, but mostly the second generation. We captured them on video and put together a sort of a storyline about how their parents came to the United States and what happened when they arrived, and how it wasn't a picnic, coming and trying to live in a new place in the Midwest of all places. Many of them had no relatives. Stories about people working at Hinky Dinky and slinging bananas and not being able to speak a word of English. And somebody else trying to ride the bus, just so he had to bring his address. I'm sure you've heard these stories before. He had to pin his address to his shirt. And this is how I got to know the community and the children of the survivors who still live here. But also we interviewed 5 youth who had been on the March of the Living, who I had worked with before their trip. And that's another one of the wonderful things I get to do, is every year I help interview the kids who want to go on March of the Living, and then prepare them for the trip and work with them afterward. And we interviewed these kids for this video, and we had a show of 700 people at the Jocelyn, and partnered with members of the Omaha Symphony, who played some different solo pieces of music that came out of the Holocaust or was composed before the Holocaust. And David Radler's exhibit was set up in the fountain court at the Jocelyn. So we had a really important combination of events where, rather than doing a fundraiser and having a dinner and asking people for money, we did something that commemorated a special event and really highlighted the survivors in our own community. The exhibit that David put together is permanently, or at the moment, is up in the Penny Davis Gallery near the Anti-Defamation League, and we hope it will remain there for a long time. It has been an amazing journey to develop this organization over the years. When I was able to expand my staff, I think is really the moment where things changed immensely. We've done a number of joint projects in addition to the Kristallnacht program, which have become community partnerships. The opera Brundebar was a partnership with the Opera Omaha, and we produced it on the stage at the Rose Theater, and had a lot of community participation there as well. We're working on a project called Remembrance, Creativity, and Transformation, which will occur in October 2012. It is with 4 string players from the Boston Symphony called the Hawthorne Quartet. And that project, we have, I think, 15 community partners. They will be playing 3 concerts. One will be a benefit here at the Jewish Community Center, and they're bringing in an artist as well. They specialize in the music of composers who were sent to Terezin and met their demise in Auschwitz. We're doing community residencies at the Kaneko. They're playing for a class at UNO. They will be all over town, and I'm looking forward to it. And the most exciting part of this whole week is that we've commissioned a new piece to be created by a composer who has listened to all of this music and created something new, the transformation of what was into something new, and that will be played with the Omaha Symphony and the Hawthorne Quartet at the end of this important week. So doing these kinds of projects couldn't be done without this growing staff, and I have Hillary Fletcher is my marketing assistant, Laura Stasny is my administrative assistant, and we just hired a teacher who's been going to our workshops forever as our educational coordinator, and one of her main jobs is to encourage schools and students to come to an exhibit that we have up at the Strategic Air and Space Museum that was created by Matt Plachek, and tells the story of our Nebraskans and liberators. And it will be up through through the summer of 2014. So we have a lot of opportunities to collaborate, and we work with the Durham, we work with Jocelyn, we work with all kinds of organizations. I sit on a committee called the Omaha Arts Educator Committee. So once a month I get together with everybody in town, from the library to the Durham to the Railroad Museum, and it's been an opportunity for us to really talk about the work. It's a time of transition for me now. I hadn't realized that it was going to happen, and but my family all ended up in Israel this past year, and for various reasons, including my husband, unknown, and we had to make some decisions about which side of the world we were going to live on. So it has always been a dream that we go back to Israel, and so I'll be wrapping up my work here at the end of October. And the Institute for Holocaust Education has a great base, a great staff, all these wonderful teachers who work under the philosophy of these other places that I've been influenced by. And so my hope is that the work will continue on in a wonderful way. We are interviewing for a new executive director, and I hope to find somebody very, very soon to be able to continue the work in the way that we have done it over the past number of years. I never imagined that we would have stayed in the United States for 12 years. I really thought that we'd be coming for 2 years and then going back to Israel a long time ago. But it's been a great journey. It was a great experience for my kids to be near my family here in Omaha and around the country. And I think it's been interesting to see how my work and my passion for my work is something that I definitely bring home. Can't leave it at home, or can't leave it at work, but my kids have really understood the work that I've done. They're not second generation or connected to survivor stories directly in our family, or at least not those who spoke about it. So they're very sensitive to the topic. They know a lot, but often my daughter will say to me, Liat will say, why do you do this work? And have explained to her that it found me. I didn't go looking for this. It truly found me, and I have just been so fortunate to have the process of working for the Ghetto Fighters Museum, which is an incredible learning organization. I walked in there the very first time, not in conjunction with the job, and I just felt like there was something about the place that had the philosophy of educating people about the topic that was in sync with the way that I would want to work in that area. So I think that after working with the testimonies and working at the Ghetto Fighters House, and they really helped me shape my ability to create the Institute for Holocaust Education and its philosophies, and I'm quite sure that that the influence of how we've worked this organization has, I think my kids have seen something grow as well, even though they didn't know, and they realized the significance of how important it was for me to do the work here and spend many hours on the telephone with survivors at home, or working on projects at home. And they're sensitive to the issue of the Holocaust, and not only that, the work of the Anti-Defamation League and how prejudice and bias take a big role, and they're very sensitive about what is spoken at home, the way that we speak about people and not speak about in an inappropriate way. They know when I'm going to react to something, but they've also definitely had an education in this bigger scheme. I hope that they will find things to be passionate about in their life, and I hope that they understand why it was so important for me to come back to Omaha and give so many years to the community where I grew up. And I think that I've really, I went away thinking I haven't spent enough time in Omaha, I don't know if I want to live there, and when the opportunity arose, it was definitely the right thing to do. It was very difficult. And even more challenging because I didn't think I would stay, but I think that we've given a lot of ourselves. I'm known as well. We were very involved with Bethel for many years. The kids were involved with Bethel, and here at the Federation. And what's most exciting is that I'm going back to the Ghetto Fighters Museum in the Western Galilee, which is still part of the partnership community and the partnership through the Federation. So I will be the director of international affairs and have the opportunity to travel and interact still with the things going on here in Omaha. In addition, I'm part of a professional organization called the Association of Holocaust Organizations. I sit on their board, and it's already been arranged for a conference to be held at the Ghetto Fighters Museum before they knew that I was leaving, but I'm going to be in charge of that conference. So they're going to be continuing connections, hopefully through the partnership and the various organizations that are surrounded at the museum in Omaha and things like that. So there's a lot still to give, there's still a lot to give and to work together with our own community. And I'm glad to be able to be part of that and know that I'm not really leaving, I'm just moving on. But I think that Omaha has a great deal to give, the ability to work with the foundation here and do things that I dream up these crazy projects, and I've only been able to do it because of the grant money that's been available through the foundation, and quite honestly also the Omaha Community Foundation and the very generous people in Omaha. The fact that I can make a phone call to the director of one of these foundations, or pick up the phone and call the mayor in Omaha because I have an idea, it really says a lot about our community and the kinds of nonprofit work that we can do, and reach out, and you don't have to reach too far. It's just a phone call away. So it's really been terrific. There is one thing I want to add, and that is that my office has been in charge of the Holocaust Commemoration Yom HaShoah program for the past couple of years, which works with all the synagogues, and that is also a very, very special program because most of my work is outside of the Jewish community, and that brings me back home every time. The other thing that we do is assist with the state commemoration that happens in the state capitol building. And that's a very significant commemoration that not too many people know about, but it is probably one of the most moving events that I'm involved with every single year. So, thank you.
Sorry we have the delay, but it kind of...
That's fine. So we created this organization without knowing that it was going to happen. And people keep saying to me, well, no one's going to be able to do the work that you do the way that you do it. And I don't believe that. I think that we have created a network of incredible volunteers. We have a wonderful board, as I mentioned, and all of these teachers out there. And there is nothing better than for me to know that when I walk away from Omaha, that there are any number of people who are continuing to do the work that we set out to do, which is to partner, to reach out, to teach in methods that are unusual, that catch a light of that history that hasn't been told before. There are survivors who are speaking who didn't speak before, and I know that they will continue to do that. So my hope is that the next leader, executive director of the organization will just continue to do the work and change it and mix it up a little bit and work with all of these wonderful people that I've had the opportunity to meet and work with. One of the things that's been so very interesting in my work is that no 2 days are ever alike. And we do the same programs every year, and we change up the speaker, and we think of new things to do, but what I think has been most inspiring are those days when I get a phone call that I'm not expecting. And I'll just tell two short scenarios of phone calls that I've received. One was a man who called, not too old, and explained that he was the grandson of a man who had been in the Red Army from Tajikistan, was under the Soviet bloc at the time. And this grandfather of his name is Sami, he was a 19-year-old boy, drafted into not drafted, he was sent to the Red Army. And his unit ended up fighting the Germans, and he was wounded and sent to Auschwitz. Not only was he from Tajikistan, but he was also Muslim and under the Red Army. So he was wounded in the head, woke up after he was injured in a train car being sent to Auschwitz. And he was one of 11 Tajiki soldiers who ended up in Auschwitz on the Soviet side. And this was in, I think, August 1944, toward the end of the time, August, September. And he spent 5 months in Auschwitz. And rather than being, as the Russian soldiers got closer to Auschwitz, they started the death marches, and his group got sent on a death march from Auschwitz. So they were marched around Europe and ended up in northern Italy, in Brescia. And his request of his grandson, because he was getting older, was that his grandson find the American unit that liberated him at Brescia in Italy. And that's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to find that unit. Now, the young man is Tajiki, and he and his brothers live in Omaha, and they run a business, but he himself is a trained doctor and was studying and working, and so in between his jobs he would come in and we would start researching this project, and I took it on very seriously. It took us an entire summer to find out that the unit that liberated in Brescia, although there was complete chaos at that time in May of 1945, in those parts of Europe that the units were just going back and forth. But Sami remembered specific details and had, there were newspaper articles about him, so we were able to follow some things. And he also saved his Red Army card. He had hidden it in his sock, which had, most of the soldiers had their cards taken away, confiscated by the Germans. Had his card been taken away when he was ultimately released, because he was liberated by the Americans and turned back to the Soviet Union, he would have been sent to Siberia because he did not have his ID. But because he had his ID, he was able to go home. And all of these years, he was the last of the 11 Auschwitz survivors in the country. So we located the unit, which was originally from Council Bluffs, Iowa. And that unit was part of a bigger group, of course. What's bigger than a unit? A company, I don't know exactly what it was, but they were located out of Des Moines. So I located the guys in Des Moines, and they have a reunion every year. So we were able to bring Sami, at the age of 86, I think, to Omaha, and he told his story, and it interested the Jewish community, of course, and the general community, and also the Muslim community, and we had a beautiful evening for him here, and he went and he spoke to schools, and he was so honored to come to America. He'd never been here before, and his grandchildren were thrilled, of course, that their grandfather was coming, and it was an incredible experience for me to meet this gentleman. But in addition to that, he came again the next year, I believe, or the 2 years after, and he decided to turn over his Red Army card to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, along with some other documents. And I took them to Washington. I had contacts there, and they were very interested, of course, in his documentation. They interviewed him extensively at the museum, and at the time they were doing a special exhibit on the outside of the building. So the Holocaust Museum is a huge building, and they were doing a night portrait show on the side of the building, and they used his photo as one of those portraits. And that's not where the story ends, because we took a trip to the United States, to Israel with part of my board, some teachers, and I opened it up to whoever wanted to go. And Sami's grandson, jokingly I said, well, maybe you want to come to Israel, and maybe grandfather wants to come, and they came with us. So we brought his 88-year-old grandfather. He went to, he had to go to Moscow to meet his grandfather, and then they flew to Israel, and they were with us for a whole week in Israel. And it was tremendous, and we arranged for a special ceremony to be held at Yad Vashem, which I thought was going to be in a courtyard, but they did it in the room with the eternal flame, and they had him light the flame. It was probably, the highlight of anything that I've done in 12 years. To have this man who, himself could have been a liberator, but up in the squalor of the war. And he also mentioned that when he was being liberated, he remembered a black U.S. He remembered a unit of African American servicemen who were among those in the camp after he was liberated. They set up little camps to try and help these people, who had been on these death marches. And so, just one story after another. So that was one phone call. another phone call came 1 year after the Holocaust commemoration programs, and it was a woman from Albania who, she and her husband were Albanian and had been living in Omaha for many, many years. And her mother was part of a family of 5 children, I believe, who, now Albania is also a Muslim country, who saved 2 Jewish families by hiding them in their home. Yad Vashem had recognized all of the family and the older siblings, but they had never recognized specifically the mother and her younger brother. So they were asking me how I could help them to at least have her mother recognized somewhere. So we arranged for the ADL, who awards a Courage to Care award, to award her the very first Courage to Care award that was outside of either Washington, D.C. or Europe, because Abe Foxman will award families of righteous Gentiles in Europe in different ceremonies or at the embassies in Washington, D.C. And I begged to have this woman recognized. She could not come to Omaha, but her granddaughter, the person who contacted me had already moved back to Albania with her husband, and they have a connection with Creighton and Omaha, but her children were still in the States. So the granddaughter accepted this beautiful award on behalf of the grandmother. But then I got a call this summer from the family saying, our grandson is getting married and everyone's coming to Omaha. We'd like to come and meet you. And so she came with her husband, and there were other children of the family who came, and they wanted to be here to tell us how important it was that we took the time to listen to their story and make it a personal experience for them. And her story is very important because as a 10-year-old girl, she was responsible. They knew when the Nazis were going to come into their little town. The Jewish family hid in those like the Albanians, and so people around knew that they were Jewish, but they would never say that they were living with this particular family, although someone must have revealed that. But the grandmother's responsibility as a little girl was to take the mother and children down into their cellar and hide them in the bathroom. And she remembers specifically how nervous she would get. She would be sick for days after that because she was this little girl responsible for hiding people and knew that she could get shot just for being there. And she was telling me that story when she was here, and you could just see on her face the feverish importance of why they did this, why it was so important to save the Jewish families who had come there. There is a special philosophy in Albania called Besa. Besa means basically you should treat your neighbor as yourself. But they really believed it, and there were other Albanians who saved Jews. And there's a beautiful book about Besa and the other families who took on this courageous act. So you just never know when you pick up the phone at the Institute for Holocaust Education what's coming your way.